Dawson Holt squinted against the red haze of a descending sun as he guided his mare down the main street of High Vale, a modest frontier town backed by rocky foothills. He wore the unassuming attire of a rancher, faded denim trousers, scuffed boots, a worn cotton shirt rolled at the sleeves. Anyone passing by might tip a hat in greeting and see only a soft-spoken horse breeder friendly and polite. Yet within Dawson's calm, steady gaze lurked the unspoken memory of a man who once wore a badge in turbulent territories and acquired a fearsome reputation he'd worked hard to bury. 5 years ago, Dawson and his wife Eliza chose Highvale for a fresh start away from gunfights and vendettas. They purchased an abandoned plot on the town's northern edge, turning it into a small horse-breeding ranch. In Highvale, they found honest neighbors, a quiet routine, and Dawson desperately hoped a final escape from violence. As he guided his horse toward Townsend's general store, he noticed fewer people than usual on the streets. Dark clouds loomed on the horizon, but there was also a subtle tension in the air, something Dawson's old instincts recognized as a brewing storm of another kind. He tethered his mare outside the store, stepping onto the wooden boardwalk. Henry Townsend, the store's proprietor, swept away dust near his door. Henry was among the scant few who guessed Dawson wasn't just another rancher. He had glimpsed Dawson's uncanny reflexes with a firearm when marauders struck a traveling wagon months back. Slow evening, Dawson greeted him quietly. Henry nodded, lowering his voice. There's a new bunch in town. They've been holed up at Sheridan's saloon 3 days now. Mean-looking lot, Sheriff Crisp is uneasy. Dawson's jaw set as he recalled his old vow never to draw a gun unless his life or Eliza's was on the line. We'll let Crisp handle them. Highvale's seen its share of drifters. Let's hope they keep their trouble to themselves, Henry murmured. Inside, Dawson picked up the items on Eliza's list. Flour, sugar, coffee, a little candy. He paid, then exchanged a terse farewell with Henry. Stepping out, he caught a glimpse of a figure stumbling along the adjacent alley. A woman's voice, sharp with alarm, cut through the still air. Dawson tensed. Then he recognized the voice. Eliza. Fear twisted his gut. Dropping the bundle of groceries at the edge of the boardwalk, he sprinted around the corner, heart thudding. In the alley behind the local doctor's office, he saw 3 rough men crowding Eliza against a wall. One of them pinned her shawl while another hissed menacing words in her face. The third stood watch, cradling a revolver in slack hands. Dawson's pulse pounded as old instinct stirred the stance. The lean forward, the hand drifting to his hip. But he'd all but stopped wearing a 6-shooter daily. He carried only a small revolver now concealed beneath his coat. His throat tightened with an unfamiliar mix of fury and dread. He had promised Eliza, promised himself that he was done with swift violence. Yet these men threatened the most precious thing in his life. That single truth overrode every hesitation. Back away from her, Dawson said, his voice low and taut. All 3 outlaws turned. The one gripping Eliza's shawl was tall with a gold tooth glinting under his sneer. The second had greasy shoulder-length hair. The third man with the revolver rested an elbow casually against the doctor's windowsill. Eliza's eyes flashed with relief to see Dawson, but also fear for him. She knew what he'd done in years past, how his quick hand once spelled doom for men like these. She did not want him dragged into that life again. Yet she also feared for her own safety. Goldtooth smirked. Or, what rancher? You'll talk us into letting her go. Eliza inhaled, trying to maintain composure. I told you to leave me alone. You picked the wrong woman to bully. Dawson took a measured breath. I'll say this once more. Move now. The man with greasy hair spat on the ground. Mind your business. We're just having a friendly chat with the lady. She was mouthy. Sheriff Bill Crisp arrived, boots thumping the dirt as he rounded the corner, panting. He was pushing 50 with lines of experience etched around his eyes. That's enough, Crisp commanded, drawing his revolver. Release her. For a moment, no one moved. The men sized up Dawson and the sheriff. Then Goldtooth roughly pushed Eliza aside and swaggered toward Crisp, eyes gleaming with reckless bravado. We ain't breaking laws, Sheriff. Just saying hello. Eliza stumbled free, stepping behind Dawson. Her chest heaved with anger, but her shoulders sagged in relief. Dawson glared at the outlaws. You hurt her. Goldtooth eyed Dawson, sneering at the calm, contained fury in the rancher's stance. We're done here. For now. He motioned to his companions, and they slunk off, spitting curses under their breath. Crisp exhaled, lowering his gun. You two all right? Eliza nodded shakily, smoothing her shawl. They didn't manage more than a scare. But they might have, if Dawson hadn't shown up. Dawson's adrenaline roared in his ears, his fists still clenched, longing to chase the men down and ensure they never tried such again. But he forced himself to relax. Let's go home, he said softly to Eliza. Crisp offered a grim smile. I'll keep an eye on them. If they start real trouble, I'll make arrests. Just be cautious. Eliza allowed Dawson to lead her away, pressing close. Neither spoke until they reached their wagon. Rain clouds gathered overhead, thunder rumbling. Dawson helped Eliza up. She placed a trembling hand on his. Thank you. He swallowed, thinking of how easily he'd nearly drawn on them. They won't bother you again. He managed, though the certainty in his voice felt forced. He saw in her eyes both relief and concern, that fear that every step back into violence might drag him from the life they'd so carefully built. As they rode home to their ranch, thunder cracked and lightning flashed, reflecting Dawson's internal turmoil. Trouble had found them yet again, and though he prayed it was a random incident, his gut told him otherwise. Men like those seldom skulk off quietly. They would not forget the defiance in Eliza's eyes or the potential threat in Dawson's Highvale's fragile peace teetered on a precarious edge. The storm outside unleashed a relentless downpour wind, rattling the windows of Sheridan's saloon. Inside, a few scattered patrons nursed drinks under the low lamplight. Moira Sheridan, the saloon's owner, a forthright woman in her early 40s, busied herself behind the bar. Her expression was tight. She'd seen a lot of hard drifters pass through her doors, but the rowdy newcomers unnerved her. At a table near the back, Colton Barr sat, with 5 of his men passing around a bottle of cheap whiskey. Barr was broad-shouldered, wearing a stained vest and a wide-brimmed hat, a thin scar cut across his chin, giving him a permanent scowl. He was listening to his men brag about the day's mischief. Goldtooth guffawed, describing how they'd cornered some mouthy rancher's wife. Barr's dark eyes flicked up rancher. You say another of Barr's men, the one with greasy hair, shrugged. He had a stance, like maybe he knew how to draw. But no one brandishes steel at us and walks away easy. Barr swirled his drink. We didn't come all this way to tangle with some nobody. We got bigger game. But if he's gonna push, we'll push back. Understand? They nodded. Barr glanced toward the bar where Moira deliberately avoided looking at him. He smirked, raising his voice. Hey, Sheridan. Another bottle here. Moira forced a civil expression, grabbed a fresh bottle and stepped over. That'll be $2. Barr tossed a single coin on the table. That's more than enough. She glanced at the coin, swallowing her retort. Barr's men leered, enjoying her discomfort. Thank you, she said, simply setting the bottle down. She retreated behind the bar, exhaling. She'd seen such bullies come and go, but Colton Barr exuded the aura of a man who thrived on intimidation. Moments later, Sheriff Crisp stepped in, shaking rain from his hat. He surveyed the saloon with a tense posture, his eyes locked on Barr's table. The saloon quieted, patrons watching warily. Barr made a show of taking a swig from the whiskey bottle. Evening sheriff, fancy night for a stroll. Crisp edged closer, voice carefully controlled. Heard about your men harassing someone today? A local woman, Barr shrugged. That right, I'll be sure to lecture my boys on manners, but no harm done from what I see. His men snickered. Moira set down the glass she'd been polishing. Crisp's knuckles tightened at his sides. I'm telling you, once Barr, keep your men in line, or you'll be leaving Highvale in shackles. Barr gave a low, humorless chuckle. Come now, Sheriff, we're just passing through. Not looking for a jail cell. Let's keep things friendly. Chris' lips pressed into a line. Then see that you move on soon. Barr's stare hardened. We'll leave when our business is done. We've got matters to settle. You understand. Moira felt her pulse quicken at the tension. She could practically see Crisp's restraint unraveling, but the sheriff had to think of the town's safety. An outright shootout in the saloon would endanger everyone. Crisp forced himself to remain calm, glaring at Barr's men. If there's more trouble, I'll lock up whoever's responsible. That's your final warning." With that, he backed off, tipping his hat politely to Moira as he walked out. A murmur rippled through the saloon. Bar's men smirked, pouring another round. Moira braced for more trouble, hoping Crisp's threat would be enough. Yet in Bar's eyes, she sensed the opposite. A man who welcomed confrontation, certain he'd prevail. Rain lashed the windows, thunder vibrating the floorboards. Some patrons whispered that they'd best head home before things got uglier. Moira discreetly ushered them out, cutting her losses. As she did, she caught snatches of Bar's conversation talk of a plan, mention of deliveries and the old troubles. She gleaned that Bar was no mere drifter. He was orchestrating something that involved outlying ranches and possibly greater violence. Finally, near midnight, Bar tossed a few coins for show and led his men upstairs to rented rooms. The saloon was left nearly empty, quiet except for the wind. Moira locked up, heart-hammering. She had a bad feeling these men wouldn't leave Highvale peacefully. Before snuffing out the lamps, she recalled how Dawson Holt had intervened to protect his wife, despite appearing as a gentle rancher. She'd heard rumors about him, a man who'd once ended a gang, single-handedly. Most dismissed those rumors as legend, but if they were true, maybe Highvale had a chance against men like Bar. Moira prayed it wouldn't come to that, and that tomorrow's sunrise might chase away the dark omens rolling in with the storm. Thunder rumbled overhead as Dawson sat by the window of the Holt Ranch house, watching the sheets of rain blur the moonlit yard. His coffee had gone cold in the cup across the small living area. Eliza finished brushing out her long dark hair, her expression pensive. "Are you going to bed?" she asked quietly. Soon Dawson replied, not taking his eyes off the storm. He changed into a dry shirt and trousers, but the tension in his muscles refused to ease. "Just want to make sure everything's all right outside." Eliza approached, setting a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm safe, Dawson. You kept me safe today, but I hate seeing that old fear in your eyes." He took her hand, squeezing lightly. "I vowed never to be that man again, the one who draws first, who lives by the gun. But I can't let them hurt you, not ever." She bent down, kissing his temple. "I know when I'm with you. Just promise me we won't let them pull us back into that life. The constant violence." Rain battered the rooftop as he exhaled, recalling the years he spent as a frontier lawman. He'd worn a deputy's star, then a territorial marshal star, until the day he got so tired of the bloodshed that he turned in his badge. "I promise," he said softly. "But if they push, I won't stand by." She understood words weren't needed. Their bond was forged on shared experiences, on a decision to abandon the path of gunfire and build a ranch where they could raise horses and someday a family. Now men like Colton Barr threatened that peace. Lightning flashed, illuminating the yard. Dawson glimpsed the silhouette of their modest stable, the corral and the half-finished fence he'd been working on. The raw timbers swayed under gusts of wind, but they held firm. In that flash, he also saw in his mind's eye a memory from years ago, standing on a dust-blown street staring down outlaws who spat curses before drawing. The memory made him shiver. He'd walked away with scars, physical and otherwise. But now was different. He had Eliza, a home, a purpose beyond fighting. He turned from the window. "Let's get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow I'll talk to Crisp. Maybe we can encourage Barr to leave before any more trouble." Eliza gave a small nod, though her eyes held uncertainty. "I'll pray it works." They retired to the bedroom, the storm's fury lulling to a steady thrumming. Dawson lay awake long after Eliza's breathing slowed. He thought of the day's events. Eliza cornered him, almost losing control he'd nearly drawn. If Crisp hadn't arrived, he might have. The old reflexes had coiled in his chest like a rattlesnake, just waiting for reason to strike. Eventually, exhaustion overcame him. He drifted off into a fitful sleep, punctuated by dreams of gunfire and thunder. The last fleeting thought in his mind was a plea that Highvale's new morning would bring calmer skies, and that Barr's presence was a passing nightmare, soon to vanish with the rain. But deep down, he feared the opposite, that the storm was only beginning. The storm subsided overnight, leaving Highvale's streets glistening with puddles of rainwater. A pale dawn spread gold across the rooftops as Dawson hitched his mare behind the Highvale church, responding to an urgent summons from Sheriff Crisp. Inside, the pews were half filled with townsfolk who wore anxious expressions, Doc Finney, the town's middle-aged physician, stood near the pulpit conferring quietly with Crisp and Henry Townsend. Nearby, Moira Sheridan folded her arms, scanning the crowd. Dawson spotted Eliza at the front, along with Harriet Finney, the doctor's wife. He quietly joined Eliza, exchanging a comforting squeeze of hands. Crisp cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. "Morning, all. I'm sorry to gather you so early, but we have pressing concerns about Colton Barr and his men." A tense ripple moved through the assembled. Crisp continued. "We've had complaints of harassment. Barr's men have refused to leave word. Is there planning something bigger than bullying folks? We can't ignore it." Henry stepped forward. "We must decide if we stand up to them or if we try to pay them off or some other measure." Murmurs broke out, some outraged, others fearful. Fred Bartlett, the feed store owner, stood. "Pay them off. We're not exactly swimming in money. They'll just keep demanding more." Moira nodded firmly. "I've dealt with men like Barr and the saloon bullies who see kindness as weakness. They'll escalate if we don't push back." Doc Finney, arms folded, added, "We're not fighters by trade. But if they move on us, we need a plan. Sheriff Crisp can't handle them alone." Crisp exhaled. "I can deputize a few folks, but if we do that, we risk a shootout. Barr has at least 5 or 6 men. They're armed and he might be connected to bigger groups outside High Vale." Dawson felt eyes shift his way. He swallowed, recognizing the unspoken question. Would he step in? After a pause, Crisp addressed him directly. "Dawson, you confronted these men once. Any thoughts on how to handle this?" Dawson exchanged a glance with Eliza, who nodded subtly, her way of giving him permission to speak freely. He stood, voice calm, but carrying to the corners of the church. "I don't advocate violence, but experience tells me that men like Barr don't leave willingly unless they see no profit in staying. We either show them collectively we won't be intimidated, or we risk them taking what they want." A hushed tension settled. Fred mumbled, "You've seen more than we have, Dawson." "Are we outmatched?" Dawson considered carefully. "If we stand together, we have numbers. If it's a matter of a straight gunfight, that's risky, but we can fortify key places, like the store, the saloon, the doctor's office. We can coordinate watchers. If Barr tries something, we ring the bell or send a messenger. My concern is that he might have reinforcements outside town. We can't be sure." Doc Finney sighed. "We're caught either way. But letting them run roughshod isn't an option." Crisp nodded. "Then we form a plan. If they refuse to leave by, say, sundown, we'll forcibly remove them. I'll deputize a few. Dawson, will you lend a hand?" Dawson felt his gut twist. This was the road he'd tried to leave. But for Eliza's sake, for High Vale's sake, he had to agree. "I will," he said, "so long as we do it clean. No vigilante justice." Crisp offered a grim smile. "Clean as possible." Eliza quietly squeezed Dawson's arm, letting him know she stood with him. The meeting concluded with folks dividing tasks. Crisp would confront Barr, Henry would coordinate supplies, Moira would keep watch for suspicious movement at the saloon, though she'd close early if trouble brewed. Dawson would gather volunteers for basic defensive training if needed. As the gathering dispersed, Crisp pulled Dawson aside. "I appreciate this. I know it's not easy for you." Dawson nodded, glancing at Eliza, who now chatted with Harriet. "We'll do what we must, but let's pray. Barr sees reason when faced with unity." Crisp's expression suggested he doubted it. Still, the sheriff clapped Dawson on the shoulder. "We'll meet at my office this afternoon to go over details." Outside, the morning sun warmed the muddy street. Dawson guided Eliza to their horses, mindful of the anxious quiet among townsfolk. Despite the new day's beauty, a sense of dread pervaded High Vale like the calm before another storm. Dawson inhaled, remembering the vow he made years ago to protect the innocent. If Barr forced his hand, he'd do just that, even if it meant tearing open old wounds to defend this fragile peace. Later that day, the sun stood high in a hot, cloudless sky. Dawson arrived at the sheriff's office to find Crisp conferring with Deputy Wallace Glover, a newly appointed officer with a youthful face and uneasy eyes. Dawson tipped his hat, stepping inside. Crisp pointed at a stack of papers. "We're going to talk to Barr with these warrants in hand. Attempted extortion, harassment. If he resists, we arrest him. You come with me." "Dawson, Glover, stay back. Watch the jail." Glover nodded, glancing at Dawson. "Good luck." They exited onto High Vale Street, the dusty road shimmering with heat. Crisp strode with purpose, one hand resting near his holster. Dawson felt a pang of déjà vu, remembering countless times he'd accompanied a sheriff or deputy to confront dangerous men. He forced himself to keep calm, stepping in time with Crisp. At Sheridan's saloon, only a few patrons lingered. Moira wiped glasses behind the bar, her expression pinched. She nodded at Crisp, then tilted her head upstairs. "They're holed up, haven't emerged all afternoon." Crisp squared his shoulders. "We'll bring them down upstairs." The narrow hallway smelled of stale whiskey. Crisp banged on the door of the largest rented room. "Colton Bar, open up, Sheriff." A tense pause, then Bar's muffled voice. "Come on," and Sheriff doors open. Crisp glanced at Dawson, who positioned himself to the side, hand near his revolver. Crisp pushed the door open. Inside, Bar lounged in a chair, hat tipped back. 4 of his men loitered, gold tooth included, their eyes flicked to Dawson with recognition. The room was cramped, bed unmade, whiskey bottles on the floor. Crisp stated firmly, "Colton Bar, I have warrants for your arrest, harassment, attempted extortion, and suspicion of assault. Hand over your weapons and come quietly." Bar's lazy smirk curled. "Arrest for what ruffling feathers?" "That's a stretch," Sheriff Crisp's jaw tightened. "Don't make this difficult." A tense beat. Dawson watched Bar's men shift hands, inching toward holsters. He recognized the subtle shift in stance. These were not amateurs. Crisp must have seen it too, because he eased his hand onto his own gun. "Stand down," Crisp warned Bar, rose slowly, adjusting his vest. He stared Crisp down, then turned his gaze to Dawson. "So the rancher's your muscle now." "Figures. He's got the look of a man who's spilled blood." Dawson didn't respond, eyes flicking between the men. Any sudden move would ignite a gunfight, in close quarters lethal for all. Crisp repeated, "Hand over your guns." Bar hesitated, then unbuckled his belt with exaggerated slowness. He tossed the belt and revolver on the bed. "Sure, Sheriff. Don't want any trouble." He looked at his men. "Do as he says." Reluctantly, the outlaws placed their guns aside, one after another. Crisp exhaled, stepping forward with a pair of handcuffs. "Turn around." In a flash of movement, Bar spun, launching a punch that caught Crisp in the shoulder. Crisp staggered, cursing. Dawson reacted instantly, drawing his revolver, but one of Bar's men lunged, grappling Dawson's arm. The room erupted in chaos. Bar dove for his discarded revolver. Crisp tackled him, wrestling to prevent him from grabbing it. 2 of Bar's men crashed into Dawson, who fought to keep his finger off the trigger to avoid shooting Crisp by accident. The bed frame splintered under flailing bodies. Goldtooth attempted a kidney punch on Dawson, who twisted, delivering a sharp elbow that sent the outlaw stumbling. Crisp pinned Bar's arm, snatching away the revolver, but another outlaw struck Crisp's head with the butt of a pistol left on a side table. Crisp dropped, dazed. Seeing Crisp in danger, Dawson slammed his elbow into the second outlaw's face. The man crashed into the dresser. Bar scrambled for a stray knife on the floor, brandishing it at Dawson. Dawson's breath rattled. He aimed his revolver, voice harsh. "Don't." Bar froze, knife clutched, eyes blazing. "You pull that trigger, rancher. It'll just bring the rest of my men down on you." Dawson advanced a step. "Drop it." Bar's lip curled in a sneer, but the unwavering fury in Dawson's eyes convinced him to toss the knife aside. Crisp groaned, pulling himself upright. He wiped a trickle of blood from his temple, then slapped cuffs on Bar with trembling hands. The other outlaws stood battered, cursing as Dawson forced them at gunpoint to line up. Crisp rubbed his throbbing head, scowling. "Deputy Glover will lock you all up. Resist again, and you'll regret it," Bar spat. "We're not done, Sheriff. My associates won't let me rot in some backwater cell." Ignoring the threat, Dawson collected the outlaws' weapons. Crisp cuffed them, one by one. Then they herded the men downstairs, past the alarmed gaze of Moira and the few saloon patrons outside. Crisp signaled passers-by to give space. They marched Bar and his men down the muddy street toward the jail. Despite bruises and blood, Bar's expression remained defiant. "You'll pay for this," he muttered at Dawson. "I promise." Dawson said nothing, but he felt a chill. Men like Bar rarely bluffed. Crisp pressed on, taking them to the sheriff's office, where Glover waited wide-eyed. Over the next half hour, they locked the outlaws in 2 cramped cells. As Crisp finished the paperwork, Dawson stepped back. Heart still hammering, Eliza rushed in, having heard the commotion. She paled at the sight of Dawson's bruised lip. "You're hurt." He managed a strained smile. "I'm fine." Crisp took the brunt. Crisp waved them off, pressing a bandage to his temple. "They're locked up. Should hold them until the judge arrives, but something tells me they won't stay long if reinforcements come." Barr stood at the cell door, fingers curled around the bars. His eyes bored into Dawson. "This isn't over, rancher. I have friends." "You'll see." Dawson turned away, remembering the old nightmares of cyclical violence. He whispered to Eliza, "Let's hope the judge arrives fast." Outside, the dusty afternoon sun felt strangely suffocating. They had Barr in custody, but it felt less like a triumph and more like stepping onto a dangerous precipice. If Barr's threats held true, Highvale's real trial was only beginning. For a few days, Highvale found an uneasy calm. The cells in Crisp's jailhouse held Barr and 4 of his men. Another had fled during the scuffle and remained at large. Townsfolk hoped that was the end of it. But rumors swirled about Barr's possible allies lurking in the region. Dawson spent most of his time helping with ranch chores. Eliza resumed her daily tasks, managing accounts, cooking, and occasionally assisting Harriet Finney with local patients. The town quietly repaired the damage from that brief brawl at the saloon, patching broken furniture and replacing shattered windows. One afternoon, Dawson rode into town to check on Crisp. He found the sheriff resting his aching head at the office desk, sifting through telegrams. Crisp looked up with bloodshot eyes. "Judge says he'll get here when he can. Could be a week, maybe more." Dawson scanned the bars holding Barr. The outlaw paced like a caged wolf, hurling insults at Crisp, lacing them with promises of revenge. Dawson lowered his voice. "Think we should move Barr to the county seat?" Crisp grimaced. "We don't have enough deputies to escort him safely. If he's got men out there, we'd be ambushed on the trail. Better to fortify the jail until the judge arrives." Barr overheard, laughing bitterly. "Fortify all you want. Men who want me free will tear this place down, plank by plank." Dawson shot him a cold glare. "We'll see." The day wore on. Dawson helped Crisp fix extra boards on the windows, turning the jail into a makeshift fortress. Henry Townsend dropped by with sandwiches and coffee for them. He also brought news. A couple of travelers reported sightings of suspicious riders near the foothills. A day's ride west, Crisp's face tightened. Could be Barr's contacts. Dawson exhaled, a knot forming in his chest. "Let me guess, the travelers left in a hurry." Henry nodded. Didn't want to linger. As dusk approached, Dawson headed home, too uneasy to enjoy the quiet of the open range. At the ranch, he found Eliza watching the sunset, arms wrapped around herself. She turned, managing a small smile. "You're safe." He dismounted, hugging her. For now, Barr's still locked up, but Crisp thinks there may be more out there. She gazed at the horizon, pink and orange, swirling in fading light. "I hate living under this shadow. We came here for peace." Dawson sighed, resting his chin on her shoulder. "We'll see it through. Once the judge comes, Barr will face charges, and hopefully his men leave us alone." Yet in his gut, a lingering dread whispered that Barr's men wouldn't relent quietly. As the sun sank below the jagged peaks, the ranch's shadows lengthened across the corral. Dawson listened to the wind rustling, dry sage recalling the tension of so many past standoffs. He prayed Highvale wouldn't become another battleground, but he read the signs. A bigger storm loomed. For the moment, however, they had each other and the ranch they'd built with sweat and patience. They shared a simple meal of stew and cornbread, speaking in low tones about day-to-day tasks. Eliza insisted on positivity, discussing the newly pregnant mare in the stable. The spring planting they'd do soon. Dawson held on to these normal rhythms like a lifeline, determined not to let the threat of outlaws overshadow everything they loved. Still deep in the night, as Eliza slept, Dawson stepped outside. Moonlight revealed rolling fields, the stable, the orchard. He paced, mind-churning, with half-formed fears. He was prepared to fight if needed, but dreaded the cost. If Barr's men arrived with numbers, what then? Highvale had a handful of defenders, many untested in real combat. He recalled the swirl of dust in distant border towns, the screams echoing after outlaws attacked. The nightmares from his past threatened to resurface. For Eliza, for the sake of the ranch, he'd do anything. But the question remained, how many ghosts from his old life was he willing to face? Lightning flickered to the west, though no thunder followed. Perhaps heat lightning or a glimpse of an approaching front. Dawson stared, fists tightening, a single vow repeated in his mind. If they come for us, I won't hesitate. He lingered until the moon sank behind the mountains. Then he stepped back inside, slipping into bed beside Eliza, careful not to wake her. He whispered an unspoken prayer to a silent God, hoping tomorrow would bring no new shadows, but the frontier seldom granted such mercies. On the morning of the fifth day, since Barr's arrest, the territorial telegraph operator in Highvale, Henry Townsend, discovered the lines had been tampered with, overnight wires cut. Henry immediately alerted Crisp, who in turn summoned Dawson to the site. They stood by the telegraph pole at the edge of town, examining the deliberate slash in the wire. Crisp scowled. Somebody doesn't want us sending messages. Could be Barr's men ensuring we don't call for more law. Dawson rubbed his chin. If they're sabotaging telegraphs, they're planning something soon. We're effectively isolated. They returned to the jailhouse where Crisp confronted Barr. We know your men cut the wires. Barr lounged against the cell bar's lips, twisting into a smug grin. I'm locked up, remember. Can't blame me. Crisp's hand curled into a fist, but he controlled himself. You think this'll help you? When that judge gets here, you're finished, Barr laughed. That judge may not arrive if word never reaches him, and if it's true my men are near, well, maybe they'll come calling. Alarmed, Crisp and Dawson began fortifying the jail further. Townsfolk heard rumors and fear. Spread Moira. Sheridan proposed a watch schedule so volunteers would patrol at night. Doc Finney organized medical supplies in case of another fight. Harriet Finney helped gather food for a potential siege. Eliza and Dawson worked side by side to secure their ranch stockpiling feed for horses, ensuring the barn could be locked. She insisted on learning how to handle a small derringer for self-defense, despite hating violence. That evening, Crisp called a meeting in the church basement. About 20 townsfolk attended. Subdued, Crisp laid out concerns. With the telegraph down, we can't confirm the judge's arrival. We must assume Barr's men might strike to free him. We either prepare to defend or consider relocating families. A heated debate broke out. Some insisted on fleeing until the danger passed. Others, including Moira, declared they wouldn't be driven from their homes. Dawson proposed a middle ground. We can move women and children to the mayor's barn on the far side of town, safer to defend one location. Men and any willing women can guard the streets, coordinate with Crisp. Though uncertain, the group agreed. They set a plan to ring the church bell if they spotted outlaws approaching. Henry Townsend volunteered to fix the telegraph lines if possible, but it would take days. Crisp concluded, we hold until the judge arrives. We won't bow to criminals. Nodding solemnly, the town parted ways. Dawson and Eliza walked home beneath a moonless sky, arms linked, each feeling the weight of the moment. The air was strangely still, as though even the wind dared not disturb the uneasy hush over Highvale. Late that night, a lone coyote howled in the distance, echoing through the dark. Dawson lay awake, recalling Crisp's words about a possible attack. He pictured men slipping into town under cover of darkness, aiming to break Barr out with gunfire. Could these simple defenses and a handful of volunteers truly stop a dedicated band of outlaws? His heart clenched at the thought of Eliza caught in the crossfire. Yet he felt no regret for stepping up to defend Highvale. He'd seen enough oppression on the frontier to know that men like Barr thrived on fear. Better to fight than let such tyranny fester. He closed his eyes, summoning the memory of gentler times. If the storm came, he would stand firm, guided by the old oath he once swore to protect the innocent. But this time he fought not for a badge or a frontier law. He fought for his wife, their dreams, and the fragile peace they'd carved out of the wild. It had been 6 days since Barr's arrest, and a nervous tension vibrated through Highvale. Any rider on the horizon raised alarm. The telegraph lines remained severed, and Henry Townsend's efforts to repair them hadn't succeeded yet. Somebody kept cutting them anew each night. In the late afternoon, Dawson was finishing stable chores when Deputy Wallace Glover galloped in, breathing hard. The young deputy dismounted, clearly rattled. Dawson. Crisp needs you at the office. 2 travelers arrived with news, said they encountered armed men a few miles out, possibly heading our way. Dawson nodded grimly, wiping sweat off his brow. I'll come immediately. Eliza, stay here. Keep an eye on things. Eliza's face tightened, but she nodded. Be careful. Moments later, Dawson rode alongside Glover into town. The main street was abuzz with hushed conversations. Crisp stood outside his office talking with a middle-aged couple who looked frightened. As Dawson approached, Crisp waved him closer. The husband, shaking slightly, recounted their ordeal. We saw 5, maybe 6 men camping near the river, passed well-armed, wearing black bandanas. One of them asked if we'd heard of Colton Bar. When we said no, they seemed suspicious. Told us to keep riding, his wife added. They had more horses than men, like they were planning for extra riders. Crisp pursed his lips. Sounds like the group we feared would show up. They might be part of Barr's network or hired guns wanting to free him. Dawson's pulse pounded. If they come here with superior numbers, we need a strong defense. The travelers left hurriedly, not wanting to remain in a possible war zone. Crisp sighed. We'll gather the volunteers again. We can't wait any longer to organize. If Barr's men strike, it could be soon. They spent the next hour going door to door, calling on the townsfolk who'd agreed to stand guard. Some people balked. Fear overshadowed their resolve. Others nodded fiercely, recalling Barr's threats and wanting no part of submission. By evening, a group of about 15 assembled at the church. Crisp and Dawson outlined a plan: watchers on rotating shifts, hidden vantage points near the jail barricades if needed. Doc Finney would prepare the church basement for possible wounded. Henry Townsend set up an emergency lantern system on his rooftop to signal if he spotted riders from the west. Meanwhile, Glover reinforced the jailhouse locks while Crisp double-checked supplies, limited rifles, shotguns, revolvers, and a handful of boxes of ammunition. As night fell, the tension was palpable. Dawson stationed himself near the jail, patrolling with 2 volunteers. The streets lay dark, shutters closed. The moonlit sky revealed no immediate threat, but every creak or distant coyote wail made them clutch their weapons tighter. Inside the jail, Barr lounged on a cot, smirking. Quite a fuss you folks are making. My men must be close. I almost feel sorry for you. Dawson stood outside Barr's cell, arms folded. Save your breath, Barr rose, sauntering to the bars. You really think you can hold back men who've fought in border wars, rustled cattle from entire ranches, toppled whole towns? This place is ripe for the picking. Dawson stared at him, expression unreadable. Barr's words pricked at his old memories. He thought of the lawless expansions, the ruthless gangs that decimated settlements. Could Highville truly withstand a season ban? Gritting his teeth, he stepped away, refusing to engage. All night watchers traded shifts, scanning the horizon. Nothing stirred by dawn. Crisp called a tired meeting at the office. No sign of them, but we can't let our guard down. Eliza arrived with Harriet Finney bearing hot coffee and biscuits for the exhausted volunteers. Dawson thanked her gently, brushing a stray hair from her face. She gave him a reassuring nod. They all shared the unspoken fear. If Barr's men were out there, they were biding their time. Over the next few days, the constant vigil continued wearing on everyone. The threat weighed heavily, halting commerce, emptying the saloon, and turning Highville into a tense armed camp. By the end of that week, no fresh attacks had materialized. Some started hoping it was a false alarm. Yet Dawson felt the dread deepen. Outlaws seldom left a comrade of Barr's reputation to languish in a cell. If they truly planned to free him, they might be gathering more numbers or waiting for the right moment. Patience was as lethal a weapon as a loaded gun in these frontier lands. On the 8th day after Barr's arrest, Crisp cornered Dawson with a serious expression. We can't keep living on this razor's edge. Our folks are exhausted. Supplies are running low. If these men are indeed near, let's confirm it. I want you and Glover to ride out. Do a bit of recon. If you see them, we'll know we're not shadowboxing ghosts. Dawson hesitated, remembering a time he led scouting missions on lawless trails. But Crisp was right. Highvale couldn't remain in paralyzed fear. All right, we'll be cautious. If we confirm their presence, we ride back fast. No heroics, agreed. Crisp said word spread that Dawson and Deputy Glover would scout the western foothills. Townsfolk offered them extra rations, quietly wishing them luck. Eliza tried to mask her worry, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Dawson embraced her, murmuring that he'd return soon. At dawn the next day, he and Glover rode out under a sky streaked with pink and gold, heading west across the rocky plains. The watchers on the edge of town waved them off, wishing for a swift and uneventful mission. Little did they know their reconnaissance would confirm Highvale's worst fears and set in motion the final confrontation that would decide not only Barr's fate, but the fate of the entire town. It took Dawson and Deputy Glover half a day to reach the rolling foothills west of Highvale sagebrush, and stunted pines dotted the rocky landscape. A warm wind kicked up dust devils that danced across hard-packed earth. They rode in silence, much of the way scanning the horizon for any sign of an outlaw camp. By midday, they stopped near a trickling stream to rest their horses. Glover drank from a canteen, eyes darting nervously. "I've never scouted bandits before," he admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. Dawson nodded. "Stick close, keep your head down. We're just gathering intel. If we see them, we don't engage. Just get out." Glover swallowed right. "Crisp said you used to track down outlaws." As a marshal, was it Dawson's gaze flicked to the mountains? "Something like that. I learned to pick up their trails, but let's focus on the present." They remounted and continued up a winding trail, following rumors that a pass existed leading to a hidden valley. Around mid-afternoon, Dawson spotted smoke in the distance, a thin plume possibly from a campfire. He motioned for Glover to dismount. They led their horses behind a ridge, tying them to scrub and proceeding on foot. The terrain grew steeper as they advanced. Every few steps they paused to listen. Twice they heard voices drifting on the breeze, though too faint to decipher. Eventually they came to a vantage point overlooking a shallow bowl in the land. From behind a rocky outcropping, Dawson peered through a small telescope. His gut clenched. At least 8 men milled about a campsite below half a dozen horses grazing. A few men were cleaning rifles while another hammered nails into a wooden crate. Glover cursed under his breath. Dawson noticed a man with a short beard barking orders, referencing Barr and the sheriff. This must be the group. They spoke in tense tones, occasionally glancing at a battered map of Highvale's territory. Dawson's pulse quickened. They were planning a raid or a prison break. After a few minutes, one of the outlaws parted the brush, revealing more horses and gear stashed. Another man emerged from a tent with fresh bandoliers of ammunition. Dawson realized they had enough arms to cause significant damage. He withdrew, whispering to Glover, "We have our confirmation. Let's go." They crept back, alert for sentries. Twice they froze at the snap of a twig, heart pounding, but after tense minutes they reached their horses without incident. They mounted and rode at a brisk pace, aiming to return to Highvale by nightfall. On the trail, Glover finally breathed. "That was a lot more men than we can handle in a frontal fight. They looked well stocked, too." Dawson nodded grimly. "We'll have to rely on the town's defenses. Crisp will want every available hand armed and ready." They rode, hard dust rising behind them as the sun dipped, painting the sky in orange and crimson. They traced familiar landmarks. By the time darkness crept in, they saw Highvale's lights flickering in the valley below. At the edge of town, Crisp and Henry Townsend hurried to meet them, worry etched on their faces. Dawson and Glover dismounted, breathless. "We found them," Dawson said. 8 men heavily armed, likely preparing to strike. Could be more joining them. Crisp grimaced, taking it in. "All right, we have to rally the volunteers. We'll reinforce the jail store saloon. Any building that provides cover." Henry nodded, already thinking of logistics. "We have a little ammo left in storage. I'll distribute it carefully." Dawson's chest tightened. This would not be a brief scuffle. It felt like a full-on siege was imminent. He recalled the battered towns he had once defended, how untrained citizens often panicked under fire. Highvale had done well against Barr's smaller group, but this new force outnumbered them. Glover remained pale, though he squared his shoulders. "We'll manage or we'll perish. Trying?" Crisp nodded solemnly. "We stand together. That's all we can do." They set out to alert the town. Lanterns glowed in windows as Crisp and Dawson knocked on doors, calling folks to a late-night meeting. At the church, families were told to gather their children, preparing to stay in safer areas. The quiet hush was replaced by the scuffling of feet and murmured prayers. All the while, Dawson thought of Eliza, how she'd soon learn the outlaws were indeed coming. His heart ached. She deserved a life free of such turmoil. But reality was harsh on the frontier, and the vow he made to protect her, to protect these good people, left no room for hesitation. By the time the church bell tolled, the entire town felt a rumbling undercurrent of fear. Crisp planned a final stand if needed, no more illusions about scaring away the outlaws. They would fight for Highvale's survival, and Dawson Holt, the quiet rancher with a hidden past, would once again step into the role of defender, no matter the cost. The lamplit interior of Highvale's church bustled with tension as nearly every resident crowded the pews. Sheriff Crisp stood near the pulpit, removing his hat to address the room. Dawson Henry Townsend, Deputy Glover, and Doc Finney clustered beside him. Eliza and Harriet Finney led a group of women in the front row, many with anxious children in tow. Crisp cleared his throat, voice carrying over hushed murmurs. "Folks, we have confirmation. A group of armed men is camping about a day's ride west. They're connected to Bar. They may come tonight or soon after." A ripple of alarm spread. Moira, Sheridan, arms folded, spoke up. "We have to defend ourselves. Our last confrontation was small compared to this." Crisp nodded. "Yes, we have about 15 volunteers who can handle guns. I'll assign watchers to the roads, especially near the jail. The rest of you, if you can't fight, relocate to a reinforced spot, the mayor's barn or the church. You'll be safer together." Henry Townsend laid out a hastily sketched map of Highvale. "We'll barricade the main street using wagons. Dawson suggests vantage points on rooftops to spot them early." Dawson stepped forward, scanning the tired, frightened faces. "If you're willing to fight, Crisp, and I will show you quick defense tactics. Stick to cover. We can't match them bullet for bullet, but we know these streets." One older rancher, Ada McLean, spoke in a trembling voice. "But if they have more men, we're doomed. Should we flee altogether?" A heated debate flared. Some argued for packing wagons and leaving Highvale at least temporarily. Others refused to abandon their livelihoods. Crisp rapped his knuckles on the pulpit to regain order. "Leaving might be more dangerous. These men will raid what's left behind. Burn it. Then we have no home to return to. We stand our ground." A grim murmur of assent passed through the majority. Eliza rose, looking at Dawson. "Harriet, and I will gather the children, keep them calm in the barn. We'll set up cots. Maybe some amusements so they're not terrified." Moira offered to help, but Crisp shook his head. "I need you on watch near the saloon. Moira, you've got a steady hand with that shotgun." She nodded in firm agreement. Henry Townsend volunteered to distribute the limited ammo from his store, while Doc Finney readied the church basement for treating wounded. The plan began to form: watchers posted on the North Road roof, sentries near the store barricades on the main street, and a fallback line at the sheriff's office. Dawson felt a cold knot in his stomach, seeing the dire seriousness. He tried to speak reassuringly. "We have courage, a sense of community. If we fight smart, we can repel them." Yet behind his calm tone, he remembered the savage cunning of large gangs on the frontier. If these outlaws had half the skill of Bar, they'd be formidable. Did Highvale have enough defenders? The answer remained uncertain. By the end of the meeting, Crisp had assigned positions. Sheriff Crisp Henry and a couple of volunteers at the main barricade. Dawson leading a rooftop watch with two others rotating to keep eyes on the horizon. Deputy Glover inside the jail with a small crew, ensuring Bar stayed locked up. Moira, Sheridan, Fred Bartlett, and a few others patrolling the side streets. Doc Finney declared, "If you're hurt, we'll do our best to patch you up, but we're short on supplies, so let's pray. It doesn't get that far." The townspeople filtered out, many wearing hollow expressions. Dawson caught Eliza's eye. She mustered a faint smile for him. He embraced her, murmuring, "Stay safe in the barn. I'll find you when this is over." She clutched his arm. "Promise me." He gazed into her eyes, seeing fear, but also that resolute glint. "I promise," he whispered, though in his heart he feared the cost of keeping it. Crisp signaled to Dawson. They were heading out to finalize the barricades under the moonlight. As they walked, Crisp lowered his voice. "It's been years since I faced anything like this. You were a marshal, seen worse." Dawson inhaled. "Yes, but we had more lawmen then. This time it's townsfolk defending their homes. That can be an advantage. They have something to fight for." Crisp nodded, jaw set. "We'll make do." They spent the next hours hauling wagons into a defensive line, hammering planks across windows, stationing watchers with lanterns. The air carried a metallic taste of apprehension. Every gust of wind made watchers tense, rifles at the ready. When midnight neared, Crisp climbed onto the porch of the general store, scanning the darkness. Dawson joined him. No movement yet. Crisp muttered, "Could be tomorrow. Could be the day after." "We stand ready," Dawson said, eyes scanning the horizon. He thought of Barr's mocking grin behind those cell bars. The man was a catalyst for destruction. Yet ironically, he sat caged while others prepared to spill blood for him. A lone dog barked in the distance. Dawson exhaled, wishing for a quiet night, though expecting the opposite. The hush weighed on them, pressed by the knowledge that outlaws lurked in the shadows of the foothills, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Highvale had cast its lot. It would fight or it would fall, and Dawson would do everything in his power to tilt the balance toward survival. In the darkest hours before dawn, Highvale's defenders fought off sleep with cups of coffee and the keen edge of fear. Dawson patrolled the rooftops, a borrowed rifle slung over his shoulder. From this vantage, he watched flickers of torchlight in the distance, likely watch fires near the foothills. Every so often, he imagined silhouettes moving, but it could be nothing more than shifting shadows. He had just descended to street level when the first shot rang out, a loud crack echoing from the northern outskirts. Dawson's stomach lurched. Adrenaline surged as watchers scrambled. The church bell clanged, a warning. Crisp and Henry stationed behind the wagon. Barricade saw shapes looming in the moonlight. A group of riders galloped forward, rifles flashing muzzle fire. Bullets whined, splintering wagon boards. Town defenders fired back, the street flaring with bursts of light. Some riders peeled off, returning fire from behind a broken fence. Dawson sprinted, diving behind a half-constructed barricade near the blacksmith shop. Another volunteer, Thomas Reed, crouched beside him, hands shaking around a shotgun. "They came out of nowhere." He gasped. "Stay calm," Dawson said, scanning the gloom. He spotted 3 or 4 riders swirling near a cluster of barrels. Shots clapped in rapid succession. Crisp's voice boomed, "Push them back." The riders advanced again. Dawson raised his rifle, aiming at a dark figure, firing from horseback. He squeezed the trigger, the recoil rattling his shoulder. The rider jerked, letting out a cry, then tumbled from the saddle. Another outlaw fired at Dawson, forcing him to duck behind the barricade. Splinters stung his face. From across the street, Henry Townsend's shotgun roared, driving 2 outlaws to retreat. Crisp and a volunteer unleashed a volley of pistol shots. The outlaws, seeing unexpected resistance, pulled back slightly, regrouping behind an old corral. Silence fell, briefly broken only by the groans of a wounded man in the street. Dawson's heart hammered. He scanned for more attackers. We might have more coming from another side. Thomas Reed clutched his shotgun, panting. "They're well armed, all right. We got 1 or 2. "Looks like it." Dawson peeked over the barricade. A figure lay unmoving near a fence post. Another body sprawled by a barrel. No sign of the others. Crisp shouted from behind the wagon line, "Check the flanks. They might be circling." A shot erupted from an alley behind the saloon. Dawson cursed. "They're trying to get around us." He gestured for Thomas to follow as he dashed toward the alley. There, Moira Sheridan and a young volunteer crouched behind crates, exchanging fire with 2 outlaws who had dismounted and tried sneaking in on foot. Sparks lit the darkness each time guns discharged flanked them. Moira called to Dawson. Dawson circled, stepping carefully over debris. He spotted the outlaws behind some crates reloading. He held his breath, eased around, then fired. One outlaw cried out, toppling. The second whipped around, returning a wild shot that pinged off a metal barrel. Dawson fired again, striking the man in the shoulder. He collapsed, cursing. Moira exhaled, relief flooding her face. Close one, good timing. Dawson, he checked the men. Both were alive but wounded. Their eyes burned with hatred. Dawson kicked aside their rifles. "Stay down." She nodded, trembling with adrenaline. "We got this, go help." Crisp Dawson raced back to the main street. The gunshots had lessened. Crisp emerged from cover, scanning the gloom. The surviving outlaws had pulled back into the darkness beyond the barricade, apparently retreating. A distant hoofbeat thundered, then faded. For a moment, the defenders held their positions, panting and waiting. No further attacks came. Crisp carefully moved forward, calling out, "Anyone down?" A couple of men moaned. One grazed, another shot through the thigh. Doc, Finney, and Harriet hurried to attend them. 2 outlaws lay dead, and 3 were wounded, pinned near the saloon and the corral. Another presumably escaped. As watchers scoured the street, Crisp approached Dawson, face slick with sweat. "You all right?" Dawson nodded, heart still racing. "Yeah, they hit us hard, but we held." Crisp's gaze shifted to the wounded defenders, guilt flickering in his eyes. "How many of ours are hurt?" "2 or 3, not sure how bad." Henry Townsend joined them, breathing heavily. "We found a horse with a bullet in its flank. The rider must have fallen. Some of the outlaws might still be lurking." Crisp wiped his brow. "Double patrol for the rest of the night. Let's secure the prisoners." They separated to gather the wounded outlaws. The men glared defiantly, spitting curses. Crisp disarmed them while Glover and a few volunteers arrived from the jail. They'd heard the shooting, but stayed put to prevent a jailbreak. Moira guided the battered defenders to the makeshift infirmary in the church. The air smelled of gunpowder and sweat. The adrenaline crash made Dawson's limbs tremble as he took stock. They repelled the first wave, but at a cost. Blood streaked the dirt. A bullet hole marred a window. He dreaded sunrise, fearing it would reveal more trouble. As the tension eased, he realized one name was missing. Eliza. Was she safe in the barn with the families? The sudden urgency gripped him. Crisp noticed. "Go check on her. We got this covered here." Dawson nodded gratefully, weaving through the debris and watchers to the barn at the edge of town. Inside, he found women and children huddled, eyes wide with fear. Eliza stood among them, her face tight with worry. The moment she saw Dawson, relief washed over her, and she flung her arms around him. He buried his face in her hair. "They attacked from the north. We fought them off." She tightened her hold. "I heard the shots." "Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch." He pulled back, meeting her anxious gaze. "Town's battered, but we're still here." She closed her eyes, tears brimming. "I prayed you'd come back." He smoothed back her hair. "I always will." Despite the fleeting comfort of her embrace, Dawson sensed the deeper truth, if this was just the first wave. Highvale had a long night, maybe several nights left in this grim standoff. The next assault might be larger, more ruthless. Still, for now, they had survived. He clung to that victory, however fleeting, in Eliza's trembling arms. By the time dawn broke, Highvale's main street looked like a battlefield. Empty cartridges littered the ground. Blood-stained patches dotted the dirt, and makeshift barricades bore splintered bullet holes. A group of weary townsfolk gathered in front of the general store. Some carried rifles slung over shoulders. Others wore bandaged arms or heads. Doc Finney and Harriet had worked through the night tending the injured. 2 local defenders were in serious condition. 3 more had minor wounds. The outlaws lost 2 men, with 3 captured. Another 2 or 3 had escaped into the darkness. Crisp was certain more lurked outside town, possibly regrouping. Standing near the battered wagon barricade, Crisp addressed the exhausted volunteers. "We can't relax. They might return with greater force. Keep your weapons close." Henry Townsend, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, urged everyone to fortify further. "We need more barriers, vantage points. If they attack again, they might come from multiple directions." Dawson pressed a hand to his aching temple, scanning the aftermath. He spotted Eliza in the distance, helping Harriet move supplies to the church. Relief spiked in him. She was safe for the moment. Crisp approached, voice low. "We should question the captured outlaws. Maybe learn their plans. How many are left?" Dawson nodded, though he hated the idea of interrogation, but time was short. Crisp summoned Deputy Glover and 2 volunteers to guard the prisoners locked temporarily in the old blacksmith's storage, since the jail was nearly full. The men were battered, scowling with resentment. Crisp set down a lantern in the dim interior. Dawson crossed his arms, letting Crisp take the lead. "You attacked our town." Crisp began, voice steely. "We already have Barr locked up. If you think we'll let him go under threat, you're sorely mistaken." One outlaw, a wiry man with a bloodied bandage on his leg, hissed, "You fools have no idea who you're dealing with. A bigger crew is coming. You can't hold off forever." Crisp's jaw tightened. "How many?" The man grinned through stained teeth. "Enough to bury you and your little rancher friend." He flicked a gaze at Dawson. "He's good with that rifle, took down 2 of ours, but it won't matter when we hit you from all sides." Another captive spat on the ground. "Release Barr, and maybe the rest of you survive." "Otherwise," Dawson stepped forward, eyes cold. "Otherwise what?" The outlaw shrugged. "You'll find out soon enough." Crisp exhaled. setting fists on his hips. We're not letting him go. The judge is on his way. You can rot here or talk sense. Maybe the law will show you leniency. The wary outlaw scoffed. Law's a joke out here. We follow a different order. He cast a mocking grin. You'll see Dawson's stomach churned with anger. They won't talk. Crisp waved Glover over to keep watch. Lock them in. Let them think it over. They stepped outside, Crisp shaking his head. They're too loyal or too foolish. Might be part of a larger ring indeed. Dawson recalled how methodical the attackers had been. This wasn't a ragtag group. They must have a plan to free Barr, and if last night was only the start, Highville was in grave danger. They reconvened on the street with Henry Moira and a handful of others discussing how best to shore up defenses. Moira suggested building a tall barricade at each entrance, manned by rotating shooters. Ada McLean offered to supervise watchers from the rooftops using her old spotting scope. Crisp agreed. Dawson took stock of the defenders, about 16 capable of holding weapons, if you counted Moira Harriet and a few determined older ranchers. Against an unknown number, it was a toss-up, but they had the advantage of fortifications and knowledge of the streets. He hoped it would be enough. All morning the townsfolk hammered more boards, moved wagons and stacked crates. They fashioned vantage points using ladders and rope, ensuring shooters could shift positions quickly. Eliza brought water and bread, giving Dawson a weary, brave smile. He wanted to whisk her away from it all, but they had nowhere to go that was truly safe. By noon, Crisp gathered everyone at the saloon. We've done what we can to prepare. Now we watch for movement. Barr's men might try attacking at night again, or even by day. Stay alert. The tension was visible in every set of shoulders. Some children hovered near parents, wide-eyed with confusion and fear. Dawson murmured to Crisp, "If they come full force, we might not hold them off, but we'll do our best." Crisp's gaze was somber. "I'd rather die on my feet than let them turn Highvale into their playground." The sun climbed overhead, shimmering on the dusty streets, baking the wooden boards. A hush enveloped the town as watchers took up posts. Henry Townsend returned to the telegraph lines, trying again to fix them. Perhaps they'd get lucky and manage to wire a message for help. But Dawson doubted luck would spare them. They were alone, pitted against an unknown legion of outlaws determined to free their leader. Still, Dawson found a sliver of hope in the unity. Neighbors protected neighbors. People from all walks of life, farmers, blacksmiths, barkeeps, worked side by side to defend their home. If that wasn't worth fighting for, Dawson didn't know what was. He only prayed it would be enough to tip the scales when the final confrontation arrived. That evening, Crisp checked on Barr in the cramped jail. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in violet and red. The temperature dropped, a cool wind blowing through the battered street. Dawson stood guard near the door. Watchful Barr lounged against the cell bars, a smug expression etched on his face. "Heard my boys gave you a taste of what's coming." Crisp kept his voice even. "Your men lost, 2 dead, 3 captured." "We're still here." Barr shrugged. "That was a scouting run. Sheriff, don't let a small victory puff you up. My real associates haven't even shown up yet." Dawson stepped closer, his tone sharp. "Stop playing games. If you cared about your men, you'd tell them to back off, or maybe you want more of them dead." Barr's eyes narrowed. "I've lived in a world where only the strong survive. Death is part of the deal. Your squeamishness doesn't change that." A flicker of anger crossed Crisp's face. "You're heading for the gallows if the judge deems it so. Your men can't change that fate. Spare your breath." Barr tapped the bars, smirking. "Maybe so, but consider an alternative. Let me walk out and we'll leave this town alone. I'll call off the dogs." "No more bloodshed." Crisp's jaw flexed. "We don't negotiate with criminals. The law will decide." Barr laughed. "You know the law's a shaky concept in these parts. Don't be a fool. You're not saving your people by holding me. You're condemning them." Dawson felt a sting of guilt at that. He'd seen towns destroyed when outlaws fixated on revenge. But Crisp stood firm. "We can't let you roam free. Not after what you've done." Barr's sneer turned dark. "Then you'll face the consequences. I promise it'll be more than you can handle." The cell area grew quiet except for the faint rattle of Barr's chains. When he shifted, Dawson and Crisp exchanged a glance. Then walk back into the office, Crisp muttered. We can't yield. Dawson nodded, though Barr's words echoed in his head. More men might descend on Highvale unstoppable. If we do, they'll just exploit that weakness. If we don't, we face an onslaught. Crisp pinched the bridge of his nose. I wish the judge would arrive, or a marshal, somebody with a larger posse, but with the telegraph down, we're alone. Dawson's thoughts drifted to Eliza, and the family still bunked in the barn. They had no illusions left about safety. They had chosen to fight for their home. He forced aside the swirl of worry. We'll hold them off again if they come. Crisp sighed heavily, exhaustion creasing his features. We have to. I'll be in the street. You stay near the rooftop vantage. Your aim's a godsend. Dawson nodded. Call if you need me. When Crisp departed, Dawson sat in the chair near the office door. Rifle across his lap, the flicker of the lantern danced on the wall. In the next room, Barr hummed some tuneless melody, an eerie contrast to the tension thrumming through town. He crossed the office, Deputy Glover dozed fitfully, shotgun resting on his knees. Dawson thought about how quickly the deputy had been thrust into a war zone. Glover's face was etched with fear and determination, a mixture Dawson recognized from his own days of uncertain law enforcement. Time crawled, Barr occasionally rattled the bars or made snide remarks, but Dawson ignored him. The repeated threats, the cycle of violence, Dawson had witnessed it too many times. Yet fear found a crack in his resolve. Fear that if a larger wave hit the battered defenders might crumble. Midnight approached. The door opened quietly, revealing Eliza with a small pot of coffee. Dawson blinked in surprise. You shouldn't be out so late. She offered a wan smile, setting the pot down. Folks in the barn are sleeping. Harriet insisted I rest, but I can't not while you and Crisp are up. Thought you could use this. He rose, taking her hands. Thank you. Her presence felt like a balm even amid this gloom. She squeezed his fingers, voice low. You look so tired, Dawson. Just hold on, all right. He nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. Trying to behind them, Barr's voice drifted. Aw, how sweet. The devoted wife better keep her safe. Holt or my men might, Dawson spun, fury flaring. One more word out of you and I'll. He clamped his mouth shut, breathing hard. Eliza's grip on his arm tightened. Barr cackled softly. Temper, temper. Eliza guided Dawson away from the cell door, her expression full of quiet resolve. He's trying to goad you. Don't give him the satisfaction. Dawson let out a shuddering breath. Tension pounding behind his eyes, he kissed her forehead. You head back. It's not safe here. She nodded reluctantly, glancing at the cell area with a tremor of disgust. Then she slipped out. Dawson listened to her footsteps fade into the night, longing to follow and keep her close. Instead, he resumed his seat, ignoring Barr's mocking gaze. He clutched the coffee as if it were an anchor. Barr eventually went silent, though the outlaw's smug grin lingered like a vile stench in the room. Outside, the wind rose, rattling shutters. If the outlaws attacked again tonight, they'd find Highvale raw nerve but ready, and if they waited, it only prolonged the agony. Dawson stared at the dull flame of the lantern, remembering a vow he made when he first settled here. No more gunfights, no more living on a hair trigger. Now it seemed fate had a grim sense of humor, dragging him back into the maelstrom. For Eliza's sake, for Highville's sake, he would not falter. But in the back of his mind, he wondered how many more battles could he endure before the violence consumed him once again. A weary dawn found Highvale enveloped in strained hush. The barricade stood unmoved. Watchers rubbed sore eyes, and Crisp paced the street in front of the jail, occasionally conferring with Henry Townsend or a volunteer. No attack came during the night. The outlaws seemed to be lying low, letting dread do the work for them. Dawson visited the barn, checking on Eliza and the families. He found them huddled among bales of hay blankets spread on the ground. Children dozed fitfully. Harriet Finney gave him a tired nod. No trouble here, though. Rumors swirl that more outlaws might be massing. Eliza rose, stepping out into the barnyard with him. The early sun painted the sky pinkish gold, casting her face in soft light. She studied him, dark circles under his eyes, tension etched in his features. You haven't slept. He mustered a thin smile. Neither have many. We can't let our guard down. She swallowed hard. Is it wrong that I wish we'd never come here? That we'd found a place with more lawmen, fewer outlaws? A pang of regret tugged at Dawson. We chose Highvale because it was peaceful, a chance to build from scratch. Didn't think trouble would follow. She squeezed his arm gently. Promise me after this, we'll figure out a new start. Something safer, if that's even possible out here. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. She returned to the barn and Dawson headed to Crisp's office. There, Crisp and Deputy Glover conferred with two townspeople who had scouted the outskirts at dawn. They reported no sign of a large gathering. Possibly the outlaws had retreated to the hills. Crisp sighed, glancing at Dawson. They might be waiting us out or planning a bigger assault. We can't sustain this forever. People are exhausted and scared. Henry Townsend arrived, shoulders slumping. Still no luck on the telegraph. Wires cut again last night. We might never get a call for help out. The burden weighed on them without reinforcements or the judge's arrival. Highvale stood alone, bracing for the unknown. Crisp tapped the desk. We could attempt to escort Barr to the county seat ourselves, but that's a day's journey. If outlaws ambush us on the road, it's a massacre. Dawson winced. I can't see a safe route. They'd expect it. They sat in silence, the only sound the ticking of Crisp's clock. Each tick felt like a countdown to the inevitable. Henry eventually left to manage his store. Crisp and Glover resumed their watch duties and Dawson took a brief moment to check on the ranch. He found it intact, the horses restless but fine. Then he returned to town, unwilling to be far if an attack came. By late afternoon, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of distant rain. The sky darkened, rolling in heavy clouds. Dawson perched on the roof of the general store, scanning the horizon with a battered spyglass. The looming storm added to the ominous atmosphere, as if nature itself braced for chaos. He spotted a lone rider on a ridge a mile away watching the town. Dawson tensed, focusing the spyglass. The rider turned away, vanishing behind a rise. A scout, no doubt. The outlaws were still out there. Moira Sheridan climbed up to join him. She'd been patrolling the side streets. See anything? He relayed the sighting. They're testing us. She rubbed her chilled arms, eyeing the storm clouds. We can't break first, or they'll smell blood in the water. But how long can we hold this siege? Thunder rumbled. Dawson lowered the spyglass, his expression grim. We hold as long as we must. As dusk settled, Crisp gathered key defenders in the saloon, deciding new watch rotations. The storm's first raindrops tapped the tin roof. Lightning briefly lit the windows. They all flinched at the brightness. The tension made each gesture sharp. Dawson volunteered for the midnight to dawn shift again, feeling a duty to keep watch with his sharp shooting. Crisp gratefully accepted Henry Townsend, arranged for a kettle of coffee to be kept hot for the watchers. Doc Finney went to the church, setting out bandages in case of more bloodshed. At the barn, families hunkered down, pulling blankets tight. Eliza paced, waiting for the slightest sign from Dawson. He slipped in around twilight to reassure her. They shared a silent embrace, the flicker of lantern light reflecting in her eyes. Words failed them, overshadowed by the silent truth that each breath might be a step closer to a decisive, harrowing confrontation. Night came, and with it a relentless downpour that drenched the barricades and turned the roads into muddy streams. Highvale's defenders settled into their positions, hearts pounding at every rumble of thunder. In the jailhouse, Barr quietly sang an off-key tune, unbothered by the storm. Dawson, perched under a small awning on a rooftop, rifle in hand, scanned the darkness. Each flash of lightning revealed swirling sheets of rain, but no immediate threat. Yet he couldn't shake the certainty that the final reckoning loomed. The outlaws might wait for the perfect moment, a gap in defenses or a lull in vigilance. All Dawson could do was stay alert, letting the rain soak his clothes and the thunder rattle his bones, clinging to the vow that he'd protect Highvale and Eliza come what may. In that sodden silence, the stage was set for the storm to break, once and for all, unleashing violence that would test every ounce of courage the town possessed. Midnight arrived with the storm in full fury, driving rain across Highvale's streets. Lanterns guttered in the wind, and muddy water pooled around the barricades. Dawson Holt crouched on the store's rooftop, water dripping from his hat brim. Lightning bursts revealed fleeting images of the town's defenses wagons, half submerged in mud. Watchers hunched in doorways with soaked rifles. Sheriff Crisp slogged through the downpour, checking each post. Henry Townsend, Moira Sheridan, and a few others braved the elements near the main barricade. Deputy Glover remained at the jailhouse along with 2 volunteers, ensuring Barr's cell remained secure. Families huddled in the barn terrified by each thunderclap. Dawson's breath fogged in the cold air. His eyes stung from trying to peer through sheets of rain. Then amid the howling wind, a muffled crack rang out gunfire. He stiffened, scanning. Another flash of lightning showed shapes at the edge of town. Riders advanced, their outlines shifting in the storm. He shouted down, "They're coming!" Then he fired a warning shot into the sky. Chaos ignited. Crisp yelled for defenders to hold the barricades. Moira and Henry aimed shotguns at the approaching silhouettes. Muzzle flashes flickered in the dark thunder, swallowing the sound of gunfire. Bullets pinged off wagon frames and thudded into wooden storefronts. Dawson took aim at a rider weaving through the mud. Despite the poor visibility, he timed the lightning flashes, sending a round that clipped the man's shoulder. The rider cursed, veering away. Another outlaw returned fire bullets, slamming into the store sign overhead. Wood splintered, raining shards around Dawson below. Crisp unleashed a volley from behind a crate, forcing 2 outlaws to abandon their charge. They regrouped near a half-toppled fence. Another group advanced from the side street, rifles cracking. Moira Sheridan blasted with her shotgun, wounding at least 1, but was nearly shot herself. She dropped behind a water trough, reloading with shaking hands. The storm raged, turning Highvale Street into a morass of swirling mud. The outlaws pressed forward in waves, some on horseback, others on foot. The defenders fired from cover, short on visibility but high on determination. Each lightning burst revealed the swirl of figures grappling in watery darkness. Suddenly, a fiery explosion erupted near the stable. Sparks shot upward, some outlaw having lobbed a kerosene lamp to start a blaze. Smoke billowed through the rain, tempered the flames. Crisp bellowed for someone to douse it before it spread. 2 volunteers rushed to throw buckets of water, stumbling in the slick ground. Dawson spotted a group of outlaws creeping down an alley, heading behind the jail. He fired twice, missing in the curtain of rain. "They're going for Barr," he shouted. Scrambling off the roof, he splashed onto the street, nearly losing his footing. He sprinted toward the jail, heart hammering. If they broke Barr free, the entire fight would turn disastrous. Lightning flashed overhead as he skidded around the corner. There in the narrow space between the blacksmith shop and the jailhouse, 3 outlaws battered the side door, one brandishing a crowbar, another fired at the window-shattering glass. Inside, Glover and the volunteers yelled, returning shots from inside the building. Dawson raised his rifle, chest heaving. He got off a shot that dropped 1 outlaw instantly. The others spun, guns blazing. Sparks lit the night. Dawson felt a bullet rip past his arm, grazing his coat. He dove behind a rain barrel, adrenaline surging. 1 outlaw advanced, crowbar in hand, while the other kept firing. Thunder masked the blasts. Deputy Glover inside the jail saw the movement. He flung open a window, exchanging shots that distracted the crowbar outlaw enough for Dawson to pop up and fire. The bullet caught the man in the leg, sending him sprawling. The final outlaw cursed, grabbed the crowbar, and tried to pry the side door again. Dawson rushed forward, tackling him. They grappled in the mud, fists colliding. The outlaw clawed at Dawson's face, snarling. Dawson hammered an elbow strike, freeing himself. The man swung the crowbar. Dawson ducked, then slammed the butt of his rifle into the man's gut. With a groan, the outlaw collapsed, knocked senseless. Panting, Dawson rose, blinking rain from his eyes. Glover swung the door open, shouting, "Holt, you, good yeah." Dawson managed, though his arm stung from the graze. "They almost got in." Glover nodded, face pale. "Barr's going wild in there, rattling the bars. We can't let him out." Dawson gazed into the dark alley, ensuring no more men lurked. Another muzzle flash from the main street indicated the battle continued, but the immediate threat to the jail was handled. The storm battered on, relentless. "Keep it locked down," Dawson told Glover. "I'll help Crisp." He dashed back toward the main street, thunder rolling overhead. Despite the mud and the gunfire, he moved with purpose, driven by the vow to stand with the townsfolk. He glimpsed Henry Townsend reloading behind a toppled wagon, Moira Sheridan firing at shadows. Bodies of outlaws and defenders littered the mire. The stench of gunpowder mixed with wet dirt. Crisp emerged from the gloom, drenched, a gash on his brow. "We're pushing them back, I think," he shouted over the storm. "Hold the line." Dawson joined him, taking cover behind a half-demolished barrel. Three more outlaws advanced, firing sporadically. One tried to hurl another lamp bomb, but Crisp shot the lamp mid-throw, sending flaming oil splattering back onto the attacker. He screamed, dropping into the mud flames, sputtering in the downpour. The other two outlaws retreated, dragging their injured comrade. Crisp reloaded with shaking hands. "We might do this, Dawson." "We might." Suddenly, a bullet whizzed in from the left, striking Crisp's shoulder. He gasped, crumpling behind the barrel. Dawson's blood froze sheriff. He yanked Crisp back to cover as the man clutched his bleeding shoulder, face twisted in pain. The outlaw responsible moved closer, but Dawson fired with cold precision, dropping him in mid-step. Another flash of lightning revealed more outlaws retreating, some helping wounded. The barrage of gunfire slowed. A ragged cry went up from the defenders. "They're running." Dawson knelt beside Crisp, pressing a hand to the wound. "Stay with me." Crisp's breaths were shallow. "I'll live," he gasped. "But the fight's not over. They'll regroup." Dawson nodded grimly, scanning for the next threat. But for the moment the outlaws had pulled back, leaving Highvale drenched in blood and rain. Volunteers cautiously emerged, rounding up wounded. The storm raged on, but no further shots rang out. It seemed they had repelled the second assault, though at a heavy price. Dawson exhaled, eyes burning with fatigue. Lightning arced, illuminating the battered street. Another day might see them victorious or destroyed, but for now they had a moment to tend the wounded, gather the fallen, and brace for whatever was next. The storm's fury eased in the early morning hours, leaving Highvale awash in ankle-deep mud. The battered defenders navigated the slippery streets, collecting spent shells, dragging wounded outlaws to the jail, and identifying the fallen. Doc Finney and Harriet worked nonstop at the church, now transformed into an impromptu hospital. Dawson helped Crisp to the makeshift infirmary. The sheriff's shoulder was bandaged, though the bullet was still lodged. Doc Finney frowned. "I need better tools to remove it. For now, we stop the bleeding." Crisp grimaced but gave a shaky thumbs up, refusing sedation. Volunteers reported at least 5 outlaws dead, 7 more injured or captured. Some had fled into the night. Highvale suffered casualties too. 2 more defenders killed and nearly a dozen wounded in varying severity. The cost weighed heavily on all. Eliza appeared pale from worry. She rushed to Dawson, hugging him. "You're all right." He nodded, exhaustion etched on his face. "A graze, nothing more. Crisp took a bad hit, though, and we lost some folks." She swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the rows of wounded, tears threatening to spill. "This is madness." Dawson squeezed her hand. "We held them off again. But how many times can we do this?" Nearby, Henry Townsend and Moira Sheridan conferred with Crisp. Crisp, despite pain, insisted on hearing the status. Henry recapped, voice shaking. "They retreated. We have no idea if they'll return with more. We can't hold out indefinitely." Crisp's jaw clenched. Barr's men must be desperate. They tried a direct assault and failed. Next, they might starve us out or burn the town. We must remain vigilant. Dawson gently guided Eliza outside, letting the doc tend Crisp. The morning sun struggled to break through lingering clouds. Puddles shone, with watery reflections of the battered buildings. The caked mud carried footprints of violence. Eliza rubbed Dawson's back. "People are talking about giving Bar up. Maybe just letting him walk so this ends." He closed his eyes, remembering Bar's smug grin, how the outlaw thrived on fear. "If we do that, they'll learn that if they threaten us enough, we cave. Maybe it spares us in the short term, but sets a dangerous precedent." She sighed. "I know townsfolk gathered near the saloon for a grim meeting." Crisp, bandaged but upright, leaned on Henry's arm as they addressed the group. The mood was heavy. Crisp's voice was low measured. "Last night's assault was big. We lost good people. I'm proud of your courage. But we must decide, do we continue this fight or do we let Bar go?" A stunned hush followed. Fred Bartlett, hat in hand, spoke first. "I hate giving in, but I also hate losing neighbors," Ada McLean said, tears in her voice. "We can't keep living in terror, watching children die of stray bullets." Moira Sheridan stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Bar is a monster. If we release him, he'll terrorize the next town. Are we willing to let that happen?" Arguments erupted. Some demanded they end the siege by freeing Bar. Others insisted on abiding by the law, or that a bigger gang would only return for more. Crisp coughed, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. Dawson decided to speak. He raised a hand, quieting the crowd. In a clear, determined voice, he said, "We've fought hard and proven ourselves. Letting Bar go might bring short-term peace, but invites more criminals to do the same. If we stand firm now, we set an example. High Vale won't be bullied. We'll endure. I know it's terrifying. We've lost friends, but I believe we can stand strong a little longer. The judge should arrive soon, unless we lose faith now." Eliza among the onlookers offered a small nod, her eyes glimmering with respect. Crisp exhaled, relieved to see Dawson's conviction. "I concur." Crisp said, "We hold out. If another assault comes, we fight again. But I won't force anyone to stay. If you want to leave, gather your belongings. Go tonight." Silence blanketed the crowd. Eventually, a handful looked away, deciding to depart. Most resolved to remain, albeit with heavy hearts. Crisp organized them again, more systematically. This time, rosters for guard duty, watchers for the road, dedicated lookouts for sabotage attempts. Henry provided what minimal supplies he could spare. Dawson helped bury the fallen that afternoon, mud still clinging to everything. They dug simple graves on a knoll overlooking the town, marking each with a wooden cross. The funeral was brief, soft weeping, bowed heads. Anxiety overshadowed mourning for the living, still had to brace for the next fight. Later, Dawson retreated to the stable behind the blacksmith's, checking on the horses. He found an older mare trembling, spooked by last night's firefight. Gently stroking her mane, he felt a profound weariness settle. This was the hardest he'd ever fought for a place more personal than any old lawman job. This was his home, threatened by men who saw violence as currency. Eliza approached quietly, slipping a hand into his. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling with empathy. "You never wanted this." He turned, resting his forehead against hers. "I'd face it 1,000 times if it means keeping you safe. Keeping us all safe." Tears shone in her eyes. "Let's pray. The next time is the last." Outside, the overcast sky crackled with distant thunder. Yet again, another storm brewed, as if nature mirrored the final showdown that loomed. High Vale stood battered but unbroken, each heartbeat a testament to the stubborn will to survive. And Dawson Holt, once a man who turned his back on violence, stood at the center of it, prepared to fight until he had nothing left for the only place that ever felt like home. The next morning dawned eerily calm, the sky still heavy with storm clouds. High Vale's citizens, bleary-eyed from multiple nights of conflict, gathered to distribute meager supplies and organize a daytime watch. Crisp insisted on staying active despite his shoulder wound, but Doc Finney forced him to rest at intervals. Around mid-morning, a tense stir rippled through the defenders. Word spread that someone approached the barricade on foot, waving a white cloth. Dawson and Crisp, along with Henry Townsend, readied weapons and moved to see who it was. A lone figure soaked to the skin stepped into view. A wiry young outlaw with a bandaged arm. He kept his hands raised. Crisp raised a brow. "State your business," the outlaw swallowed clearly. "Nervous, name's Quince. I got a message from Tovar. He's the one leading us out there. He wants to talk, says maybe we can strike a deal." A wary hush. Dawson exchanged a glance with Crisp. They recalled Barr's threats. Crisp's voice was tight. "We're not releasing Barr. If that's your deal, no point talking." Quince trembled, glancing at the ring of armed townspeople. Tovar said, "If you don't free Barr, he'll destroy your town bit by bit, but he's open to a truce. Maybe if you pay a tribute, we'll leave Henry." Townsend barked a disbelieving laugh. "Tribute? We don't have enough for that, even if we wanted to." Crisp glared, hand on his bandaged shoulder. "Tell Tovar we're not negotiating. We'll fight to the end if we must." Quince's eyes flicked to Dawson. "He says if you send out that rancher Holt for a parley, we might find terms. Tovar respects a man who can shoot." Dawson stiffened. Crisp shook his head firmly. "No, you want talk. Tovar can come here unarmed." Quince squirmed. "He won't. He's set up near the ravine. If you don't come by sundown, he'll assume you're refusing. More attacks will follow." Townsfolk murmured, uncertain. Crisp stared Quince down. "Leave. We'll consider your words, but no promises." Quince licked his lips, turned and stumbled off. As soon as he was out of earshot, Crisp let out a disgusted sigh. They want tribute or a parley. Smells like a trap. Henry nodded. We can't pay them off. We hardly have anything left. Dawson considered. He singled me out. Tovar knows I've been picking off their men. He might want me out in the open, easy to ambush. If I go, I risk being killed or taken hostage. If I don't, they'll launch more attacks. Crisp took a step closer, voice low. I won't order you to do it. You're free to refuse. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Dawson's face. He pictured Eliza Crisp's battered arm, the graves on the knoll. What if they're serious about negotiating a truce? Henry frowned. I doubt it, but maybe we can stall them. Buy time. The judge could arrive any day. Moira Sheridan joined them overhearing. It's risky, but maybe a parley could let us glean their numbers or location. They must be running low on supplies too. A knot formed in Dawson's stomach. He despised the idea of stepping into an outlaw camp alone, but if there was even a slim chance to end the siege without more deaths, it might be worth it. He exhaled shakily. I'll do it, but I'll need a backup plan. If I'm not back by nightfall, assume they took me. Crisp set his jaw. We'll track you, or we'll fortify for the worst. They spent the day preparing Dawson would ride out near the ravine alone, but Crisp decided to send 2 watchers, Fred Bartlett and Ada McLean, trailing at a distance, ready to signal if Tovar's men tried an ambush. Meanwhile, Henry would keep the town on alert in case the outlaws used the parley as a distraction. Around mid-afternoon, Dawson found Eliza outside the barn explaining the plan. She looked stricken, going alone. He gently brushed her cheek. I have to try. Every day we wait, more blood is spilled. If there's a chance to end this, tears welled in her eyes, but what if they kill you? He pressed her hand to his heart. Then Crisp and the others will fight on, but I'll do everything to come back. She clung to him, trembling. I can't lose you. He held her tightly, wanting to memorize her warmth. I'll be careful. Promise. As sunset approached, Dawson saddled up. Crisp, face drawn, said, remember, no sudden moves. Keep them talking. If it feels wrong, get out. Dawson nodded. He rode West Cloak heavy with tension. Fred and Ada followed a quarter-mile behind, hidden by rocky outcroppings. High Vale's barricades shrank behind him, the sky turning a molten orange. He thought of all that hinged on this mission, the Eliza Crisp, the entire town wariness coiled in his chest. After nearly an hour's ride, he spied a small fire glimmer near the ravine. Approaching cautiously, he saw men posted with rifles. In the dim glow, a tall figure stepped forward. Rafael Tovar, evidently the man in charge now. He wore a tattered coat and carried a polished revolver on his hip. Dawson reined in, raising empty hands. Tovar studied him with cold eyes. Holt, I presume. Good of you to come. Dawson dismounted slowly, scanning the area. Half a dozen outlaws crouched behind rocks, rifles aimed. Tovar gestured to a large flat stone near the fire. Sit. Let's talk. Despite every alarm bell in his mind, Dawson tried to project calm, stepping forward. If this truly was a parley, he had to see it through. If it was a trap, he'd fight to survive. Somewhere behind the ridges, Fred and Ada hopefully watched, ready to signal if needed. The sun dipped lower, shadows elongating. The hush was palpable. Dawson settled on the stone Tovar, leaning against a boulder across from him. Tovar's mouth twitched in a humorless smile. Let's make this simple, rancher. You give us bar or you pay us a hefty sum to vanish. Otherwise, we level. Highvale Dawson's heartbeat thudded. He forced an even tone. We can't pay. We don't have resources. Bar's in jail awaiting a judge. Let the law handle it. Tovar exhaled as if disappointed. Law out here, we make our own. You and your folks have proven annoyingly resilient, but we have more men on the way. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Highvale stands no chance. Dawson clenched his jaw. We're prepared to fight. We've done so twice already, Tovar scoffed. You've lost people. How many more will die for your pride? Lightning flickered in the distance. Dawson realized the same storm system might be returning. We're not giving up Bar. That's final. Tovar's eyes narrowed. Then we have nothing left to discuss. One of Tovar's men raised a rifle slightly as if waiting for a signal. Dawson tensed, reading the threat. If you kill me, the town won't surrender. They'll fight to the last, Tovar sneered. Yes, but without their best shot, they'll crumble faster. Dawson's palms dampened with sweat. He tried a final appeal. Pull back your men. If you truly care about them, you'll avoid more bloodshed. Bar is a lost cause. Tovar barked a short laugh. Bar is a friend. He'd do the same for me. And once he's free, we unify our operation across 3 territories. This is bigger than your puny ranch. The tension snapped. Dawson realized Tovar wasn't here to compromise. This was intimidation, pure and simple. He braced, scanning for a path to run. Tovar's expression hardened. I'd hoped you'd see reason. Very well, he flicked a hand. One outlaw raised his weapon, taking aim at Dawson. Dawson threw himself sideways just as the shot boomed, kicking up dust where he'd sat. He rolled behind a boulder, drawing his revolver. Shots erupted from all sides, muzzle flashes lighting the gloom. He squeezed off 2 returns, forcing the outlaws back. Tovar cursed, diving for cover. In the confusion, Dawson spotted his horse spooked by the gunfire. He had to reach it, or he'd be pinned. Another bullet whizzed overhead. He glimpsed Fred Bartlett's silhouette on a distant ridge rifle flashing. Ada McLean also fired from a vantage. They were interfering to give Dawson a chance. Seizing the moment, he sprinted to his horse, leapt into the saddle, ignoring the sting of a bullet grazing his thigh. With a hard kick, he urged the animal into a gallop, weaving between rocks. Tovar's men cursed, returning fire. Sparks danced in the darkness. Fred and Ada fired again, covering Dawson's escape. He raced across the scrubland, heart thundering, half expecting a bullet to knock him off the horse. But soon the outlaw's shots faded behind him, replaced by the pounding of his mount's hooves. Fred and Ada joined him, urging their own horses to a gallop. Ada's face was pale, a cut across her cheek. Are you hit? He swallowed, feeling the hot sting in his thigh. A graze, nothing fatal. Fred spat in disgust. They never wanted peace. Let's get back to Highvale. Warn them, they thundered toward the distant glow of the town. Overhead, lightning crackled, foretelling another tempest. Dawson's mind whirled with Tovar's words, more men, on the way, unstoppable force. The final showdown was coming. He had done all he could to avert it. Now Highvale would either stand or burn, and Dawson, bound by oath, would fight until his last breath to ensure it endured. 30. Dawson, Fred, and Ada arrived at Highvale's barricade, soaked in sweat and adrenaline. Crisp Henry Townsend and Moira Sheridan rushed forward, tension etched on their faces. Dawson slid off his horse, grimacing at the pain in his leg. Crisp caught his arm. What happened? Dawson panted. Tovar, no negotiations. It was a trap. They want bar or tribute. We refused, so they tried killing me. Henry's eyes flashed with alarm. They're coming again, aren't they? Dawson nodded, voice tight. Soon he hinted at reinforcements. We might face their full force any day. A wave of dread rippled through the gathered townsfolk. Crisp steadied himself, ignoring his bandaged shoulder. All right, we have no choice but to dig in. We knew it might come to this. He helped Dawson limp to the church, where Harriet Finney quickly cleaned and bandaged the bullet graze. Eliza appeared, her expression anguished. I knew it. Are you sure it's just a graze? Dawson nodded, hissing as Harriet applied disinfectant. Just a scratch, I'm all right. Eliza's hand shook. Thank God, Doc. Finney looked grave. We can't keep patching folks up. Our supplies are nearly gone. Crisp, standing in the church doorway, said, We'll ration what we have. Everyone meet at the saloon in an hour. This time we'll plan for the worst possible scenario. Despite exhaustion, the defenders gathered at the saloon as requested. Thunder rumbled ominously outside the sky, turning charcoal again. Crisp addressed them, leaning against a table. We know Tovar's men could outnumber us, but we still have fortifications. If they come in mass, we fight from the barricades, street by street. If we have to fall back, do so slowly so they can't flank us. Henry spread out a more detailed map. We'll position watchers behind the blacksmiths, along the rooftops near the jail, and at the store. If Tovar tries multiple prongs, we can signal with whistle blasts, Moira added. We move the families, everyone not fighting, down into the church basement. The barn is too exposed. We'll guard the perimeter if possible. Dawson, leg throbbing, studied the map. We have to keep the jail secure above all. If they free Bar, the fight doubles in intensity. Crisp nodded solemnly. Exactly, Glover will station inside with 3 volunteers at all times. The plan crystallized a layered defense, no illusions about a swift victory. Each volunteer took a station each corner of High Vale assigned. The final stand would be a test of grit. Some folks looked pale, yet no one voiced backing down. They'd come this far. There was no turning back. Before everyone dispersed, Crisp spoke quietly, his eyes sweeping the room. We've lost good people. We might lose more. But remember, we defend our homes, our families. Let Tovar's men see that we won't bow. High Vale stands united. A subdued cheer of agreement rose. People trudged off, checking weapons, reinforcing barricades. Eliza approached, Dawson, tears glistening. I'll help Harriet with the families, but please come find me when it's over. He wrapped her in his arms. I promise. They lingered in a silent embrace, the saloon's lamplight casting their intertwined shadows across the floor. Around them, the hustle of final preparations reverberated. Stepping outside, Dawson felt the moist breeze. The storm approached. Crisp was correct. Time was short. Dawson's mind flicked to Barr, still mocking them from his cell. If Tovar succeeded, High Vale would burn. If the defenders held, they might forge a lasting peace. Either way, the next confrontation would be decisive. He hobbled through the muddy street, ignoring the ache, to check the vantage points. The watchers, some old, some young, nodded in grim acknowledgement. They'd come too far to yield. Another clash in the night or day, or whenever Tovar struck, would see High Vale's mettle tested like never before. Lightning arced across the sky, briefly illuminating battered storefronts and bullet-riddled walls. Dawson inhaled, tasting fear and resolve. For Eliza, for Crisp, for the honest people of this town, he'd stand in the crosshairs, again come what may. In the swirling wind, he almost heard the echo of footsteps. Tovar's army marching closer. The final hour approached, and all of High Vale braced for the storm that would decide their fate. Night draped High Vale in a cloak of tension. The dark clouds overhead flickered with distant lightning, but rain had yet to fall. Every defender manned a station, nerves on edge. Dawson set up on the roof of the general store, rifle ready, a small supply of bullets arranged meticulously. Below, Crisp limped around the barricade, refusing to remain still despite Doc Finney's admonitions. Henry Townsend guarded the north approach with Fred Bartlett and Moira Sheridan. Near the jail, Glover and his volunteers watched the windows, ensuring Barr remained locked up. The church basement bustled with frightened families, Eliza and Harriet offering calm reassurance. Somewhere beyond the faint glow of the town's lanterns, Tovar and his men gathered for a final push. Dawson recalled Tovar's warning of reinforcements. If they arrived, High Vale might face an overwhelming force. He steeled himself, scanning the gloom. Then, with a subtle shift in the wind, he sensed movement, a flicker of torchlight at the far edge of town. Then another figure's advanced black silhouettes in the moonless night. Dawson gave a sharp whistle, alerting Crisp. The defenders tensed. Henry Townsend from behind the barricade yelled. Positions, muzzle flashes erupted as Outlaws opened fire, bullets slamming into wagons and boards. The defenders replied in kind, rifles cracking. Dawson found a target in the gloom, squeezed off a shot. He couldn't tell if it landed, but the figure dropped out of sight. Return fire peppered the storefront one round, grazing the roof near his foot. Suddenly, from the east side, another wave of riders surged in howling war cries. Crisp spun, cursing. They're flanking us. Fall back to second barricade if needed. The night exploded with gunfire. Tovar's men hammered High Vale from two directions, some on horseback, others creeping behind crates. Dawson saw more shapes flooding in than before, maybe 20 or 30. He aimed carefully, each bullet precious. Several outlaws collapsed under the defenders' barrage, but more poured forward. Henry's shotgun roared, blasting a would-be saboteur who tried tossing an oil lamp. Another outlaw flung a torch onto a wooden awning. Flames burst high, flickering across the chaotic scene. Crisp barked orders, voice cracking with strain. A bullet whined, hitting a volunteer who cried out, collapsing. In the chaos, Dawson caught sight of Tovar himself, a tall shape weaving among the attackers, urging them onward. He tried to line up a shot, but Tovar vanished behind swirling smoke. Then out of the corner of his eye, Dawson glimpsed a group splitting off, heading for the jail. He yelled down, "They're going for Bar Glover. Watch out." Shots rang from the jail's vicinity. Glover and his men fired from the windows, but the outlaws hurled something at the wall, a homemade explosive that burst with a dull roar, blowing a hole near the door. Wooden shards flew, Glover's voice cried out in alarm. Dawson scrambled off the roof, sliding down a gutter, ignoring the jolt of pain in his leg. He sprinted through gunfire bullets, zipping past men shouting and falling. Reaching the jail, he found an outlaw hammering at the cells inside, while Glover lay dazed near the shattered door. One volunteer was pinned by debris, another lay dead shot in the chest. Barr's triumphant laugh echoed. "Get these chains off me, you fool!" Enraged, Dawson shot the outlaw in the back, dropping him instantly. Barr cursed. Another outlaw lunged from behind a desk, swinging a rifle. Dawson twisted aside the blow, grazing his shoulder. He fired point blank, the thunderous roar deafening in the tight space. The man toppled lifeless. Barr yanked on his cell door. Straining, Dawson leveled his revolver, breath ragged. "Stay put," Barr sneered. "Finish me or let me out. Another wave of my men is right behind you." Glover stirred, pushing debris aside. A precarious chunk of wall threatened to collapse. Dawson rushed to help Glover stand. The deputy's head bled, but he was conscious. "I'm good," he wheezed. Outside, the roar of battle intensified. Crisp's voice rang out. "Hold the line! Don't let them break us!" Dawson gestured for Glover to keep watch on Barr. "Don't let him escape." Then he staggered back outside, where flames illuminated a swirling melee. He saw Crisp behind an overturned wagon, exchanging frantic shots with multiple outlaws. Henry Townsend, reloading, bled from a graze on his cheek. Moira was nowhere to be seen in the haze. An outlaw brandishing a knife lunged at Crisp. Dawson snapped off a shot, cutting the attacker down. Crisp nodded gratefully, but exhaustion showed in his eyes. The outlaws pressed in, unstoppable as a flood. Then overhead thunder boomed, and a fresh torrent of rain began to fall, dousing flames but turning the street into a slippery mess. The defenders rallied, using the murk to their advantage, firing from cover. Tavar's men, seeing their attempted jailbreak fail, redoubled efforts to smash the front lines. Dawson found Moira near the saloon door, pinned by gunfire. He crouched beside her, returning fire to drive the outlaws back. A bullet caught him in the side, grazing another line of burning pain. Moira screamed, pulling him behind cover. "Dawson," he grimaced, pressing a hand to the wound. "Just a scratch," he lied, vision swimming. The outlaws seemed endless, but each minute the defenders fought with desperation, cutting them down. Eventually the storm's crescendo, and the defenders' resolve forced Tover's men to falter. They began dragging away their wounded, retreating from the unrelenting hail of bullets. Crisp, sweat and rain mingling on his brow, urged a final push. Drive them out. A ragged cheer rose as the outlaws fled the street, some galloping off into the darkness, others staggering behind corners. The defenders slumped behind barricades, breathing in ragged gasps. Dawn broke on a ruined, smoking street littered with bodies and debris. Tover's men had vanished like ghosts, leaving their dead behind. Dawson collapsed to his knees, blood dripping from his side. Crisp rushed over, ignoring his own pain. Henry and Moira also hurried in. "We did it," Dawson croaked. Crisp nodded, tears filling his eyes. "We're alive. God help us. We're alive. But at what cost?" The church bell tolled mournfully, signaling the end of the carnage, at least for now. Doc Finney and Harriet scrambled among the wounded, calling for help. Families emerged from the basement, sobbing at the destruction. The final assault had left Highvale in tatters. Dawson grit his teeth as Crisp and Moira helped him stand. "We need to check the jail." They limped over, finding Glover still upright. Battered but alive, Barr still locked behind iron bars. Barr stared in stunned fury at the wrecked building. His rescue had failed again. Outside, the first rays of sun cast an orange glow on the devastation, muddy, blood-soaked streets. Bullet-riddled walls, smoldering wreckage. Many outlaws lay dead. Others had vanished. Crisp coughed, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. "It's over." For now, Dawson, struggling to remain conscious, whispered, "Yeah, we held Eliza." Rushed in tears streaming. Gathering Dawson in her arms, Harriet ushered them to the church for medical care. Crisp gave a final exhausted nod, collapsing against the jail door. He'd done what he promised, defended Highvale to the last. Whether Tavar or any survivors might return was uncertain, But for the moment, the defenders stood victorious amid the wreckage, battered yet unbroken, proving that unity could withstand even the darkest storms. 2 days passed in a haze of pain and exhaustion as Highvale struggled to regain footing. The final assault left 6 townsfolk dead. Many more injured, including Crisp and Dawson Tover's forces, were shattered with over a dozen outlaws killed and more wounded or captured. Though a handful escaped into the wild, the threat of a large gang lingered uncertain. In the battered church, Doc Finney and Harriet tirelessly treated bullet wounds, burns, and broken bones. Eliza served broth, changed bandages, and comforted families mourning loved ones. Moira Sheridan helped gather supplies from the store, distributing them to those in need. Dawson rested on a cot near Crisp, his wounds stitched, his side burned, and his leg ached, but he managed to walk short distances with Eliza's help. Crisp, bandaged across the shoulder and chest, tried to direct town matters from his bed, occasionally lapsing into painful coughs. Henry Townsend approached Crisp and Dawson. "We have about 8 outlaw prisoners locked in the jail, plus Barr. We can't hold them forever, but the telegraph is still spotty. I keep trying to fix it." Crisp winced, motioning Henry closer. "We'll wait for the judge or a marshal, if the line is even partially restored. Send a message if not. We might have to escort them out once we're strong enough," Dawson spoke quietly. "Have we seen any sign of Tovar or the outlaws who escaped?" Moira stepped in, arms crossed. "No scouting parties found tracks leading south, likely retreat. Maybe they're gone for good." Crisp closed his eyes. "We can't be sure, but they're too weak to mount another attack soon. Let's focus on rebuilding." Word spread that the crisis had abated. Families emerged from the church basement, blinking at the damage to their once quiet town. Bullet holes, scarred storefronts, shattered windows let in cold wind, and broken planks piled in corners. Yet the people walked with heads higher, having survived a trial by fire. Dawson insisted on helping, hobbling around with a cane made from a broken shovel handle. Eliza scolded him for overexertion, but he pressed on, lifting boards one-handed, offering directions on repairs. Crisp joined him once he could stand, though Doc Finney begged him not to strain. They pounded nails into makeshift patches, hammered shutters back into place, and used wagons to haul debris. On the 3rd day, a rumor swept through Highvale. A stagecoach arrived from the next county, carrying Judge Wainwright and 2 deputy marshals. They had learned of the crisis from partial telegraph transmissions and hurried over. A hush fell as the stage rolled up the battered main street, the driver gawking at the bullet-riddled buildings. Judge Wainwright, a stately older man with a trimmed beard, disembarked, flanked by deputy marshals. Crisp, leaning on Henry's arm, greeted them. Dawson and Eliza stood nearby, along with townsfolk. The judge surveyed the devastation, eyes solemn. "My God, we came as fast as we could, heard about Colton Barr and a siege. Seems we're too late to prevent this carnage." Crisp cleared his throat. "We did what we had to. Barr and some outlaws are in the jail. We have evidence of extortion, attempted murder. You name it." The judge's face hardened. "We'll see them tried immediately. The territory owes you a debt from the look of it." One of the deputy marshals studied Dawson, recognizing the stance. "You ex-law friend Dawson," nodded slowly. "Used to be. We all pitched in." The marshals nodded. Impressed, Judge Wainwright took Crisp's statement along with accounts from Dawson, Henry, and multiple witnesses. Over the next day, they sorted out the prisoners, verifying injuries, capturing statements from the battered outlaws. Barr, defiant to the end, cursed them all, vowing revenge. But the judge listened to the evidence with measured calm. He pronounced that Barr and his men would be transported to a more secure facility for trial, escorted by the marshal's posse. The day of departure arrived. A small crowd gathered as Barr and the outlaws chained were loaded into wagons. Barr glared through the bars, face twisted with hatred. Crisp, bandaged but resolute, told him, "This is the law you scoffed at. Don't forget the people who stood against you." Barr spat. "Highvale's living on borrowed time." "My associates will come." Dawson stepped forward, quietly meeting Barr's gaze. "We'll be waiting." Barr's lip curled, but fear flickered in his eyes. The wagon rumbled off, flanked by marshals. Highvale exhaled collectively. The shadow that loomed over them was finally being carted away. Judge Wainwright offered Crisp a handshake. "We appreciate your courage. I'll file official commendations." The territory owes you and your people gratitude. Crisp nodded, voice gruff with emotion. We just want peace. With that, the stage and wagons rattled down the dusty road, leaving Highvale free of bar for good. Townsfolk watched until they vanished over the horizon. A hush settled, then quiet. Sobs and relieved embraces. The fight was over, truly over. Dawson and Eliza found themselves standing near the battered church steps. They watched Crisp accept handshakes and quiet thanks from neighbors. Some folks tried to celebrate, but the losses weighed too heavily for jubilation. Instead, they felt a somber relief. Turning to Eliza, Dawson exhaled the tension of weeks. She embraced him, tears shining. We're safe. Finally, he held her, emotions swirling. Yes, we made it. She pressed her forehead to his. I'm so proud of you. Dawson glanced at the bullet scars on the buildings, the fresh graves on the knoll. We all fought. This is our home. We had to. They stood there letting the warm morning sun wash over them, soul-deep weary, but filled with a quiet, resilient hope. Highvale would rebuild scarred but wiser, and Dawson Holt, once an ex-lawman yearning for a peaceful life, had found that even in the face of relentless violence, a community's unity and courage could defy the darkest storms. A week later, Highvale looked wounded yet determined. Crude patches covered bullet holes. Salvaged lumber formed new shutters. The barricades were dismantled, replaced by piles of broken wood for firewood or future repairs. Families slowly returned from the church basement to their own homes. Life stirred in the dusty streets again, though echoes of gunfire still haunted memories. Crisp's shoulder healed, gradually aided by Harriet Finney's nursing. Doc Finney oversaw the final stitches removal for Dawson's wounds, noting he'd carry more scars. Dawson accepted that quietly. Each scar told a story this time, a tale of solidarity and sacrifice, rather than lonely vigilante justice. Eliza helped with reconstruction efforts, cooking hot meals for neighbors, distributing them in the evenings. The sense of community deepened. The trials had bound folks closer. Moira Sheridan reopened her saloon under limited hours, offering free drinks on the first night to celebrate survival. In the late afternoon sun, Chris found Dawson in front of the stable checking the horses. The sheriff's arm rested in a sling, but he managed a faint grin. We got a letter from the judge. He and the marshals delivered Barr to the county seat. The trial's scheduled in a month. Likely a hanging if justice is served. Dawson gave a small nod. He earned it. Crisp sighed. Town council wants me to stay on as sheriff, but my injuries might need a break. They also want to honor you for your service. A wave of embarrassment flickered across Dawson's face. I'm just a rancher. Crisp clapped him gently on the back. You're a man who saved this town. Don't dismiss that. Dawson swallowed maybe. But it was a group effort. We all stood together. That's what made the difference. Crisp agreed, then he patted Dawson's shoulder. Come by the saloon tonight if you feel up to it. Folks want to express their thanks. As the sheriff limped away, Dawson stared at the horizon. He heard Eliza approach, footsteps soft in the dusty yard. How are you feeling? She asked. He turned, letting the last rays of sun warm his face. Tired but at peace. She leaned against him. Do you still want to move somewhere else away from danger? He mulled it over, recalling how she'd once voiced that wish. In truth, nowhere on the frontier was fully safe. I don't know. Maybe, or maybe we found a place worth fighting for. She smiled softly. Highvale is still home, even more so now. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. We'll stay for a while, see if we can build something stronger so no one else tries to tear it down. They walked hand in hand through the main street. Children played amid half-repaired fences. Doc Finney and Harriet tidied the church steps, storing leftover medical supplies. Crisp shared a laugh with Henry Townsend over a repaired storefront. Despite the scars, Highvale felt more alive than ever. That evening, a small crowd gathered at Moira's saloon. Dawson and Eliza joined in sipping watered-down cider. Crisp offered a toast voice trembling with gratitude. To Dawson Holt, who refused to yield to each of you for standing together. Highvale lives on, a subdued cheer rose. Dawson felt heat rise to his cheeks, unused to praise. He spotted Fredada, Moira, and so many others nodding. They'd all lost something, friends' innocence, illusions. Yet they'd gained a bond forged in adversity. When the short gathering ended, Dawson and Eliza wandered outside under the starry sky. The air smelled of sage and leftover gunpowder. He slid an arm around her shoulders. Let's head home. They rode at a gentle pace toward the Holt Ranch, the moonlight guiding them along the familiar path. The corral fence still needed repairs. A few boards snapped during the siege. The house bore a bullet nick in the corner, but it was there as a testament to resilience. Inside, they lit a small lamp illuminating the cozy living area. Eliza set water to boil, though they were too weary for much conversation. Instead, they shared a silent closeness, reflecting on how close they'd come to losing everything. At last, Dawson sank onto a wooden chair, inhaling deeply. We overcame Buck Ryder, or Colton Barr, or whoever tries to rule by fear. We overcame them by refusing to bend. Eliza knelt beside him, resting her head against his knee. It's who you are, a protector, you can't deny it. He gazed down at her memories, swirling the countless gunfights, the regrets, the vow never to kill again. I tried, he admitted softly. But maybe there's no escaping what we're called to do. The difference is, this time I fought for life, not for a bounty or a badge. She smiled, tears in her eyes. You fought for us? He brushed a gentle hand against her cheek, then pulled her into a tender embrace. Yes, and I'd do it again. Outside, the crickets resumed their song, a lullaby for a town that had nearly been snuffed out. The lamp's glow cast dancing shadows on the walls, flickering over the scars. Dawson carried on body and soul, but for once those scars didn't define him. Instead, they served as proof that a man could face his darkest fears and still choose hope. And so the night cradled Highvale in a fragile peace. Tomorrow would bring new labors, new challenges, but also the promise of rebuilding on stronger foundations. In the hush of that quiet resolution, Dawson, Holt, and Eliza found solace. Hearts entwined, each breath a testament that after the fiercest storms, even the battered can stand under clearing skies together and unbroken.